The legendary and terrifying King Ghidorah is not the only member of his species. How many other Ghidorahs do we know of that may be roaming around in the future of the monsterverse? And what Ghidorahs do we know of that have existed in all of the Godzilla lore? Until now, King Ghidorah has been one of Godzilla's most iconic rivals, coming very close to besting the King of the Monsters and even claiming the crown of the Titans for a short period of time. Not only was he able to nearly defeat Godzilla, but could cheat death in the process, coming back in the form of Mechagodzilla despite his body being destroyed. But with Ghidorah being such a menacing threat, there are other versions of the characters and other members that may still be out there. And today, fellow heralds of the Titans, let's talk about some of the most dangerous and captivating Ghidorah variants and highlight a few of our favorites. Let's begin with one who started it all, which was the Ghidorah displayed in the Showa era of Godzilla films. This version of Ghidorah is not just responsible for widespread destruction, but the creation of Ghidorah as an entity. The personalities, backstories, and core traits of both himself and Godzilla can be traced back to the Showa era. In the beginning of the Showa timeline, Godzilla was established as a tragic villain, someone who was lonely, and a violent creature who caused destruction. This Godzilla was at first feared by humanity, and was actively warded off in whatever ways were available to the human race. At best, he was a wandering Ronin, but at the worst, this Godzilla was an outright villain. The arrival of Ghidorah, though, not only gave him a substantial threat to face, but also rehabilitated this image and rebranded the mighty kaiju as a protector of Earth. In response to Ghidorah's arrival, humanity learned of a far greater evil than that of Godzilla, and Godzilla actively worked to rally other monsters to his cause, battling Ghidorah in the service of Earth itself. This alliance between Godzilla and other kaiju began to reshape Godzilla's image, as in the Showa era, he moved from villain to now hero, a trend which is the cornerstone of many aspects of the monsterverse. In the monsterverse, Godzilla is seen as a protector of the planet, and in any battle wherein Godzilla is facing another Titan, his victory results in the survival of humanity. This precedent, though, was set all the way back with the arrival of King Ghidorah. The Showa version is not the strongest one of the character, but certainly had the deepest ramifications on the future of Godzilla. As the stories developed, several different versions of Ghidorah gave rise to one another, and one of the most well known is Mecha Ghidorah. As it would turn out, Godzilla and Kong are not the only two kaiju to have a mechanical variant. But in this case, Mecha King Ghidorah isn't completely mechanical. In the timeline of the Heisei series, the comatose body of the original King Ghidorah was found in the year 2204, centuries after his defeat at the hands of Godzilla in this era. According to this timeline, Godzilla's destruction of Japan had drastic effects on the timeline that veered the course of history astray. Because of this, when the race known as the Futurians found the body of Ghidorah, they decided to augment him with cybernetic upgrades, using the advancement of the 23rd century. Once this was complete, they sent him back in time to Tokyo, where this time, he stood a chance at defeating his old nemesis. His gravity beams, flight capabilities, and laser-based augmentations made him an absolute unit for Godzilla to face. And while Godzilla wasn't able to defeat Mecha Ghidorah in their first encounter, he was able to escape, promising to terrorize Japan another day. As for the default version of Ghidorah, however, his origins are a bit more fluid based on the era in which we find him. One of his most compelling origin stories might reveal just how another iteration of Ghidorah could rise up in the monsterverse. In the monsterverse, we know that King Ghidorah comes from a land among the stars, and is an extraterrestrial in origin. According to the Heisei era, King Ghidorah is actually the mutated form of an organism known as a Dorat, which was a genetically engineered house pet which was commonplace in the 23rd century. Right now, we do not have any evidence that the Ghidorah of the monsterverse was created in this way, but it's a fun story to tell nonetheless, and there are certainly avenues with which a Dorat may be introduced into the monsterverse. These Dorats were brought back in time by the Futurians, featuring a resemblance between a cat and a bat with also some reptilian features. In 1954, 3 of these Dorats were abandoned in Bikini Atoll, which would become a site for a new atomic bomb testing, and just like Godzilla, the radiation mutated these 3 Dorats into one hybridized entity. Over the years, the creature grew into a 3-headed behemoth known as Ghidorah, and in some versions of the story, this is his origin. In the Monsterverse, Dorats have not yet made their debut, but could very well find themselves integrated into the larger universe in a number of ways. With the prevalence of titans across the planet, including a Dorat, even if it deviates in the original origins, this would not be difficult to include in the Monsterverse at all. And even if the Dorat never become a Ghidorah, it would be interesting to have this nod to the Heisei era. While these are some of the weakest iterations of Ghidorah, there is one iteration who is not only drastically superior to this counterpart, but is actually depicted as a hero. In 2001, we got GMK, a flip in the usual script where we see this version of Ghidorah as an ancient protector, one who is worshipped and beloved by the people. Not only is this Ghidorah more docile though, and is far weaker than many of the counterparts that we'll be discussing later, he actually cares for the well-being of humanity, is a clear enemy of humanity, and Godzilla's objective is to lay waste to Japan, as several of his previous incarnations sought to do as well. Usually Godzilla is not one-on-one match for Ghidorah, and he has needed help defeating the False King several times. Most of the time when Godzilla wins against Ghidorah, it's a hard-fought, sorely won battle. But this is not the case with GMK Ghidorah. This Ghidorah needed Mothra's help in order to defeat Godzilla, and the script was flipped not just in terms of their allegiances and moral compasses, but in terms of their power dynamic as well. As far as a menacing threat that bows to no man, however, we are obligated to talk about two specific versions of Ghidorah, those being some of our favorite, Indes Ghidorah and Kaiser Ghidorah, otherwise known as its alias Monster X. Let's begin by diving into the story of Des Ghidorah, the demonic entity known for the culling of Mars. Millions of years ago, it was Des Ghidorah who laid waste to the entirety of the Martian civilization, turning his attention eventually to Earth. When Des Ghidorah arrived, he came into contact with a legion of Mothra. They were able to band together in order to ultimately defeat this version of Ghidorah and seal him away in an unmarked tomb. What's interesting to note is that Des Ghidorah isn't actually a direct rival to Godzilla, and is a more closely intertwined rival with Mothra. In the present day, Des Ghidorah was reawakened during a deforestation event, one which allowed the Goliath to resume his reign of terror across Earth. At this point in time though, many of the Mothra had died off, leaving only the queen and her son, Mothra Leo. The aging queen, however, was far beyond her prime, and was outmatched by the might of Des Ghidorah, leaving her son to avenge her eventual death. What is compelling is that we do know that Des Ghidorah is directly related to King Ghidorah, and that the two are a part of the same species, though whether or not they share any direct familial ties varies based on the continuity. But what makes Des Ghidorah interesting is he is not a direct variant of King Ghidorah, but again is one of the clear examples of another member. But what's even more fascinating is in the third entry of the Mothra trilogy, Mothra comes face to face with the original incarnation of King Ghidorah. And in the Monsterverse, we know that Mothra came to Godzilla's aid against the False King. While Godzilla has not come into direct conflict with Des Ghidorah on any occasion, he has done battle with one of the most powerful variants of the character, known as Kaiser Ghidorah. During the twilight of the Final Wars, the Xiliens were being driven away from Earth and had one more trump card remaining. They summoned a Gorath meteorite to Earth in order to aid in their conquest of the planet, and on this meteorite was the creature known as Monster X. The origins of Monster X are shrouded in mystery, with a few conflicting accounts regarding exactly where the creature came from. It is believed that the Xiliens didn't create nor engineer Monster X, but found and bent him to their will. And in later comics, they do in fact confirm that he is the same species as other Ghidorahs. It's important to note that in this continuity, wherein Ghidorah is an alien creature from a distant planet, he is not a mutated hybrid of three Dorats. But in this line of events, the two came from the same world. At first, this creature is a dead match for Godzilla, and as soon as he lands, he is able to defeat Godzilla. The duel eventually expanded though, and Monster X enlisted the aid of Gigan. But for a full video on who exactly Gigan is and his significance, as well as why he's way more savage than many give him credit, be sure to check out our video on Gigan. Eventually though, Mothra would come to aid Godzilla, and the four monsters clashed in a major city square, with the fight culminating with the death of the Xilien mothership. But the journey of Monster X and his battle was not complete. In the aftermath, Monster X continued to grow and mutate, eventually transforming into the beast that would become known as Kaiser Ghidorah, more reminiscent of the predecessors of Ghidorah in his physical appearance, but far larger and more powerful. This version of Ghidorah has been able to absolutely manhandle Godzilla, throwing him across the streets of Tokyo with little effort. It was only after getting aid from the Gotengo that Godzilla was empowered with enough energy to blow Kaiser Ghidorah's middle head clean off, an event that turned the tide of the battle. Kaiser Ghidorah is very clearly one of the most powerful members and variants of the Ghidorah species that we have ever seen, but he is not the most powerful, and there is one more contender that is truly the strongest version of King Ghidorah. The final Ghidorah comes from the Reiwa era, otherwise known as Godzilla Earth. This version of Ghidorah is not only revered as a god, but across the galaxy. The Exif clergy inadvertently discovered this monster, who ravaged their homeworld and converted the survivors of the clergy into religious zealots. Their purpose quickly began to seek other planets to sacrifice to their Ghidorah god, as Ghidorah spent his life hopping from world to world, eradicating any life forms he could find. This version of the Titan is capable of quite literally bending the fabric of space and time to his will. This puts him as reality warping in terms of powers, and puts him far beyond any other version of Ghidorah, even Des Ghidorah and the Kaiser. His control of gravitational fields allows him to collapse singularities and travel between dimensions, as well as completely dematerialize and warp Godzilla's atomic breath, rendering it completely useless. Against all other versions of Ghidorah, this reality-bending iteration puts him leagues above the best in terms of sheer strength. In fact, he is not even a three-dimensional being, and the figure that we see is actually his best attempt at squeezing himself into a three-dimensional space. The very sight of his true form, though, can induce madness. He can absorb different forms of energy that even Godzilla is incapable of manifesting. He is also unable to be detected by conventional technology, and his ability to telepathically control technology has brought entire realities and worlds to their knees. No other version of Ghidorah is quite literally a fourth-dimensional being, and this is by far and away the most powerful version of the character. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of these members of Ghidorah's species? Would you like to see any of these individuals make their way into the mainline monsterverse? I definitely think a version of Des Ghidorah would be extremely interesting, and maybe just a nod to the Dorats. But anyway, my friends, what is your favorite version of Ghidorah? And would you like full videos on any of the members of his species? Smash that subscribe button for more kaiju content as well as superhero content, and I hope you're having an absolutely phenomenal day.